things up today.
So, Anu, go on live stream.
I have questions. Seems to be a good connection here.
I'm hoping that sitting next to me with you, it really does make a person feel like
A bun.
very potent.
Yeah, there's an abundance in the room.
Abundance. Literal gods. No questions. We still have 5 more minutes. We'll take. Yeah, Kavita, if you're there, can you please post the link for live stream so that if anyone who cannot hear can go there. Thank you.
Suniji, is Scotty there today?
Yes.
Oh, good, okay.
She's leaving?
No, I just was hoping that she would be.
Yeah. We'll start.
Some people come over here.
Yeah, if you cannot hear for some reason here, then go to that link there. So that that seems to be working today.
He says they can let me know they can type,
Yeah,
but I think everything's on.
wonderful. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karamavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Continuing with the Easterly talk. The second condition for being a dhira, or the second definition of the word dhira, is the one who is compassionate. That is adhira. Compassionate means it's first is the cognitive ability, and this is the emotional ability. So there is a certain cognitive togetherness where logic, all these things are not just, given over to some subjective belief based on one's ragadveshas. And here, that cognitive ability is accompanied by an emotional ability in the form of an emotional togetherness. This is what adhira is. And whose outcome is compassion, is expressed as compassion. And so what is this really here? It means that one is able to have, one has done the introspective work. And what is that work? The preparation. The inner work needed to be able to see the truth as oneself and to not, dismiss the truth because one is committed to the subjective subjective perception of oneself as a dehi, like say, oh please give me, and therefore one is not waiting to be forklifted out of one's desperation. So if one is not committed to that subjective belief, I am permanently helpless, one is able to interrogate this belief and see that this helplessness comes and goes. It's not a permanent feature of it's not my swarupa, it's not a permanent feature. In sleep I am not helpless. Many times when I am helping others, I am not helpless. So obviously this helplessness is a superimposition upon the self. When the Upanishad reveals that, I should be able to see, and I am only able to see if I have done the introspective work of being able to interrogate and overcome my own helplessness. Uddharet Atmana Atmanam. The 6th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita elucidates this very clearly. It's one thing to say I need help, but then even when the rope is thrown, if I don't catch hold of it thinking it's a snake, then it's something is wrong with that. Because of my own suspicion, I think it's a snake. I don't catch the rope that is given, even though I feel I'm drowning, and so the help is given, but I'm not able to see it. This is all not a cognitive problem here. It's an emotional problem. It's a kind of a cognition, but it's almost an emotive cognition or an emotional preparedness. And the preparedness has to come from being able to see that I am in this mess of samsara because of my own wrong perception and inability perhaps to see the problem and thereby craft a solution, to see that I'm trying to craft a solution, and what I have crafted is just a raft of my own karma, which is not going to take me anywhere, which is going to fall apart, because what I am seeking is the uncrafted whole, which has to be the truth of myself. When this is revealed, I should be able to see it. And so such a person is called someone who is emotionally together, not just cognitively, smart. Somebody can be very cognitively smart. They have a number of one-liners, and then they finish your sentences for you, and then they show off, their general knowledge at parties by naming some, capitals, and by knowing the height of tall buildings and all these things. You can memorize all these things, and then you can say that I am unsurpassed in cognitive ability. But then if that cognitive ability is not also matched up with the adequate emotional growth, then we have a mutant, not a dhira. A mutant is like that, One side fully grown, another side truncated. This is what it is. So the emotional ability has to match the cognitive growth, and only then the person is called a yukta. And here some some inquiry based on the self and some effort is involved. And the effort is to gain this preparedness, to get to the bottom of this thing. Even to approach a teacher is effort. It's much easier to sit at home and say, if I'm supposed to gain this knowledge, the teacher will drop into my hands, you know. And hopefully it's not a bada Mahatma, so I won't get a fracture. You have to just hope. You know, bada means big, you know. Mahatma means great soul. So, so if the great has to do with the body and a big teacher literally drops into my hands, then, you know, I have to just hope. This is not this is not the whole thing. Even to look for the solution, I override my despair. There should be a little override button that everybody comes with. There is, but I should be able to find it and press it, you know, when I'm feeling distressed. So I press that override button, and out of the crocodiles, you know, of doubt, misery, the sharks of despair, I am able to see a way out. That is what is this inner growth. And that is what really is the building brick of compassion. Because here the ability to see the way out comes from overriding this helplessness. And the overriding this helplessness comes from a compassionate attitude towards oneself and towards the world. That it cannot be that bad that I can't come out of it. Nothing is against me. There is not some kind of a suspicious, what is that called? Conspiracy. So the ability to dismiss my own conspiracy theories, so much so that, you know, the left hand gets suspicious of the right hand. Oh, you are looking, you're not good. Stop looking at me. You know, I'm going to hover. You know, this is some kind of an autoimmune condition of sorts, emotionally autoimmune, meaning there is a, you know, one part is attacking the other part, and this is not a good situation. So that's what I mean, that there is an inner togetherness. So the inner child has to be interrogated, has to be brought up and integrated with the adult. Because what are we talking about the inner? What do we mean by inner child? A bundle of unreasonable ragadveshas. Beyond logic, against logic, will not listen to reason. That's what, even a small child, does it listen to reason? You know, you say, oh, daddy is very tired today. It will say, I don't care, I want this right now. Oh, mother is sick, I don't care, I want this right now. Now. And so too the inner child, this bundle of ragadveshas that keep broadcasting the frequency of now in the wrong way. Of course, we all want to remain in the now, but that now which is broadcasting was then. That is its problem, that it thinks that the then is now. That is its problem. It's not able to distinguish the now from the then. It's not able to say that was then, this is now. So each time it gets hurt, it thinks it's happening, you know, now. But the hurt is centered on the emotional inability to be able to process that which happened then. So everything that happens, all conspiracies, all suspicion, all hurts, all victimization, all sense of feeling adrift at sea, all sense of feeling abandoned, neglected, unloved, insecure, everything, that's whole gamut is not happening now. Right now the person is maybe a CEO in a big company, but is reduced to puddles when they don't get their own way, or is reduced to puddles when somebody doesn't behave in the way that they would have liked to, because those desires are like frozen needs. This is what is called a frozen need, a need that has, kept alive, as it were, in that same state. Frozen means it has not rotted, it has not succumbed to time. It has not been processed and composted and integrated into this living tree. Frozen means it is as it were. Like you put something in the freezer, 6 months later it is just as it is. So this frozen, each time the jiva cries, it's the frozen need that is being activated. It's not the need of today. It's a mithya need. It's a mithya within mithya need. It's a subjective need that whose urgency belies the fact that it was actually happened a long time ago. I mistake the urgency to think that the need is arising right now. The need is not right now. Right now one is confident, right now one is fulfilled, right now one doesn't have a need, right now one is okay, right now one is together, right now one is cognitive, and right now one is fine, nothing more, nothing less. This is how it is. But then that then now conflation happens because when that need, that original need happened, and it was neglected, that need, unfulfilled need, was frozen in a certain time when it got atrophied. The inner child is unable to distinguish because it carries the force of the need into the present day and overwhelms the cognitive ability. You see that I told that there are two parts, the cognitive ability and the emotional maturity. In fact, the emotional maturity casts a pall, eclipses, like Rahu, eclipses the cognitive ability. That is what the inner child is, Rahu and Ketu. Headless needs, really. Needs which have no basis in real time. Or needs without a tail, the needs which don't lead anywhere. That is Rahu and Ketu, which are the shadow planets. We have, I believe, we only have 7 planets. We don't count Uranus and Neptune. And then the Western astrologers came to our way and declassified Pluto from the planetary status. Pluto, no longer a planet, just the toe of the solar system hanging around in space. The Vedas had already said Pluto is not a planet. The science caught up, astronomers caught up later. And then Uranus and Neptune we don't have because they are too far away to influence the astrological chart. So the Vedic astrology doesn't have Uranus, Neptune, never had Pluto. And instead of which we still have 9 planets. How? Because we have these 2 shadow planets called Rahu and Ketu, which are called the northern and the southern nodes. Nodes of what? One's emotional personality and makeup. Really. So their position in the chart shows the difficulties one has integrating certain emotional parts of oneself into the adult. Knowing which we can say, okay, this is where the difficulty is, these are the antidotes, there is parihara. That's why Rahu and Ketu are made into deities that can be propitiated. So when I resurrect these frozen needs in the form of a collective, collective devata, that everybody has frozen needs, already I feel better. It's not only me, thank God. I'm not the crazy one, everyone is equally crazy, there is comfort in numbers. So when you make it a collective social fact, then you can invoke, since everything is Bhagavan, you can invoke the collective unconscious. That's why outside the temples there are all these various snake-like figures, Naga Devatas. Rahu, Ketu is invoked. And at the end of every temple there is Navagrahas, these 9 planets which one can circumambulate. And Rahu, Ketu have a abiding presence there. And so when you look at them, you say, okay, you're not just the collective unconscious, you're not just the unconscious of me, you're not just my yet to be integrated inner child, you are everyone's yet to be integrated inner child. So therefore, it becomes an order. It becomes a part of the psychological order. An order is a law is always infallible. So that there is this unconscious is beyond my ken, beyond my ability to control, beyond my ability to do anything except have a certain self-mastery over it. That is why I pray. I pray to this law that has created this unconscious. May I not come under its spell too often. This is a beautiful thing. So the Rahu and the Ketu become devatas, become deities for propitiation, because I invoke in them my own aspects of my own inner child that is not yet under my control. And so the position of the Rahu and the Ketu shows which area the person has difficulty with, and also other planets that it's aspecting, like if Rahu or Ketu for that matter aspect something like Venus. Venus stands for the creation, creative ability, abundance. So there are chances that the person feels non-abundant, or unprosperous, or inhibited in creative expression. So there is all these ways one can look at that, and then knowing that this is not set in stone, this is not some fatal situation, it's not my fate, it is just a blueprint which can be overridden with my purushartha, with a human will. Let us not ever forget that moksha is purushartha, not prarabdha. It's not based on your karma, whether you are going to gain freedom or not, which is really your own nature. It is something to do with that effort, that purushartha ability, which is eclipsed by this Rahu Ketu with this unconscious, that has to be removed, and that becomes 9/10 of the preparation. In fact, cognitive ability, is easy to gain, very easy to gain. You just take some, you train the brain and then it is fine. You know how to deduce, you know how to infer, all these things. It's a skill, and the brain can learn at any age. Even after a stroke, you can learn, you relearn everything. That's why people are able to do everything. Even after part of the brain gets damaged, the brain is a very resilient instrument. It is a karana. But then, if the emotional ability does not match the cognitive ability, one is a mutant, ninja. Why ninja? Defensive. And in the process of defensive, one becomes offensive. Yeah. And the whole cognitive ability, which could be harnessed to seeking the truth of oneself, is instead harnessed to making new weapons of mass destruction to those who conspire or who I perceive to conspire against me. New avatars, new astras and shastras, how to combat this, how to not be influenced by that. What a waste of time. What a waste. And here one dies shrouded in one's own conspiracy theories, and one is reborn, There's some kind of a groundhog, that's all, afraid of its own shadow. This is what it is. Groundhog karma, this is what it is. Afraid of its own shadow, it's conspiring against itself. This is the karma. Bhagavan has a sense of humor. And this is why one needs prayer, and one uses all the tools as one would the rungs of a ladder to get to the place of an emotionally able person. It's a very sad state to be emotionally disabled. Even to be mentally disabled is okay, because you become within the programming of Bhagavan. Your reactivity, your whatever it is, becomes the programming of Bhagavan. But if the emotional disability is not interrogated, there is no hope. There is no hope at all. And so therefore, the Dhira is the one who has both the cognitive ability to sift through the search, and when the person is told that what you're searching is you, the ability to internalize that knowledge, and the emotional ability to not resist that teaching. Both are important, because both are needed to swallow. It's not a belief. If we have a belief about Ishvara, about God, it's a belief pending understanding. This is what is called Shraddha. The attitude that I will know someday. This is what it is. It is not that I will be resurrected someday. No, I will know someday. It's not that something or will be resurrected and will lead me to something, no. It's all right here, right now. I don't have to die to gain that heaven. That ihaivate taihi jitas sargah yesham samye sthitam manah. The 5th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita says, by them, this heaven is gained where? Ihaiva, right here. For whom? Yesham samye sthitam manah. Who are dhiras, whose mind has an equanimity. Yes, who are blessed with this emotional equanimity. They are the ones who have one heaven, right? Heaven is right here. You can make a hell of one's life, or you can make a heaven of your own life. The choice is yours. If you put on the glasses of conspiracy theories that everyone and everything is against me, suspicion, sorrow, and somewhere, some place is still left pure for me to get that and tap into that. But then, as soon as I encounter that purity, the suspicion casts over that, and even that is not left pure. Everything becomes sullied because the glasses have not been wiped clean. This is what happens. And so, this is the thing, and then without the glasses I cannot see because I need the glasses, and the glasses are because I am afraid of what the eyes will see. So I rather have those glasses which are besmudged by the subjectivity of my own perceptions, that, don't let me see the light at the end of the tunnel. Don't let me see even the tunnel itself. And then I have this doomsday feeling, and this is not something that is a dhira. So dhiraha, so with the eyes of the cognitive, a highly developed sensitivity, cognitive ability, and a highly developed emotional sensitivity to one's own needs, and those needs which are not needed one is able to suspend and override and heal those needs because they are frozen. You don't have to heal the needs, you have to heal this entity which has not grown up to realize that those needs are not needed. You have to heal that entity, you have to mother this entity and then integrate it within yourself. So that the inner split, the inner duality comes together as one. Even though it's easy to focus on other people and wait for them to give you and make you feel better, no one can make you feel better. Yeah, they can only make you feel bitter. That's all. They can't make you feel better. And this is something, that's why the cognitive ability and the emotional ability go in tandem, hand in hand. It's like the bikes where two people are biking. Yeah, two people are pedaling. It's like that. It's a tandem understanding. Because the fact that I cannot make other people make me feel better. I cannot have other people make me feel better comes from the cognitive ability, really. And then it lightens or enlightens the emotional child to say, okay, we are here, just the two of us here for the time being. Actually, there is one. But right now, let us just tentatively accept this second, this ninja fellow. And then I am the one, this witness, have to integrate this that is witnessed. So first I have to witness the unconscious and then let it integrate within me so that it's not some kind of a standalone entity that is demanding the then to be converted to now. If you start converting the then to now, the now becomes then, and then what happens? And then nothing happens. That's all. One is stuck back in time. It's like everybody has this sci-fi romanticism of time machine. I don't know why. Everybody is stuck back in time. Everybody has a personal hell called a time machine, really, where this inner child is stuck somewhere back in time. So you, as this sci-fi hero, have to go back and get that inner child and repatriate it into present. That is your own sci-fi novel. This is what, it's not a novel idea, but that is what one has to do. That is what one has to do to become dhira. And then when that preparedness takes place, not when something happens, some kind of thing, outside of your ability. So therefore it's not based on belief. So when this preparation takes place, so dhiratvam is incumbent upon, it is incumbent upon you to prepare for this dhiratvam, to invite this dhiratvam, to make an effort to become a dhira. And then what happens? Then, provided you do that, then such people paripashyanti, see, paritaha pashyanti. Pari is a, what do you call that which comes before? Prefix. Yes, pari is a prefix. Pari means everywhere, all around. And they see everywhere. They see Brahman, this para, which was talked as para, that absolute, which is not outside of themselves, which is outside, inside. In fact, the space has come out of this para. They see the self everywhere. They see Bhagavan in everything. They see God in themselves and everywhere. They see everything everywhere. And so the hands that were like this become like this, because one is wondrous in awe, in that awe, that if everything is Bhagavan, where do I bow? Correct? Where do I bow? So the begging hands are no longer begging. There is no deenatvam, there is no helplessness, and because all there is the glory. And so such people see, and what do they see is described in all the rest of the words here. Yat, they see that. The yat means that. Tat, that which. Tat is that, yat is which. So they see that which. Adrishyam. Here it's described as Adreshyam Chandasam. Adrishyam is not an object of sight. They see that which is not an object of sight. How is that possible? How can I see that which is not an object of sight? How do I see that? Yeah, see is within quotations. In fact, to use a grammatically wrong sentence, they be that which is not an object of sight. They are that. They don't see that. They are abiding that. They are as living as that. So they see in the sense of they cognitively recognize, because of their emotional and cognitive abilities and maturities, they recognize that this Brahman that they have been looking for somewhere, trying to catch, like some kind of a, pitcher and a catcher, goalkeeper, in the game of samsara. I want to catch Bhagavan. They see that the catcher is Bhagavan. The seer is Bhagavan. Bhagavan is not outside of the seer-seen dichotomy. That dichotomy itself is Bhagavan. That which is beyond the dichotomy is Bhagavan. I am that Bhagavan. So you don't have this permanently begging position anymore. Let me catch, let me do this, let me have, something is coming, I have to ask, I have to catch. All this permanently begging position is gone. Yes. And so therefore, everything is Bhagavan, 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 Bhagavan. Adrishyam, not a specific object of sight, like even this flower. This just bloomed in the last lecture. Yeah, this is like everyone's antahkarana that is listening to the lectures. Yeah. This is the truth of everybody that is blooming right now. This was in a form of a bud. Yeah. So, this budding knowledge, this blossoming knowledge, this is the... So like even this flower, you can see it as an object and it is subject to time, because 1 hour ago it was like this, now it is like this. Tomorrow it will be like this. Day after tomorrow it will be like that. And then after that it will be, yes, compost. Yes, post. Yeah, this was pre, then it will be post. That's why it's compost. Yeah. And then, so this I can see as outside of myself. I can grasp it with the sense organs. It has a nice flavor. I can inhale the sense, the fragrance. Very nice. And very delicate scent I can inhale. And I can do all these things with the flower. But Bhagavan, if it is one flower like this, then what about this flower? Less celebrated, but less smaller. But if only this is Bhagavan, then what is this? What is this? Non-Bhagavan. Then if Bhagavan is all pervasive, then you can't have one Bhagavan, one non-Bhagavan. So these two I have to see as Bhagavan. These two I have to see as Bhagavan. These two I have to see as Bhagavan. This also is Bhagavan. Seer Bhagavan, seen Bhagavan. And the process of seeing where the light strikes the flower and travels to the eyes, that split of a second, that second is Bhagavan. Who seconds that? That second is Bhagavan. And everything is Bhagavan, 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 Bhagavan. Paritaha pashyanti, yat pashyanti, yat tat pashyanti, yat tad adrishyam, tadeva pashyanti. They see that which cannot be seen. Yeah. Through the inner eyes of cognitive and emotional maturity, they see the truth of themselves as not outside of the scope of that which is the only thing which is, and that is not outside of me. That is resolves into I, but the I never resolves into that which is. That is what they see. So that is resolves into I. How do we know? What is the first letter of is?
I.
See, so easy it is. So easy I is. It is so easy. Everything is I. They see that I as being everywhere. But the I is not an object of sight. I know I am, but I don't have to see I. If I stand in the mirror, what do I see? Body. If I can read my own mind, what do I see? The mind. Sometimes you can't read your own mind. That's why we need all this qualification of Dhiratvam explained. Yeah. And then if I see my senses, or if I witness my senses, what do I see? The senses I see. If you stand in front of the mirror, you cannot see yourself. But yet you can see yourself, because there is an inner mirror which in the form of an invisible conscious awareness broadcasts the message, I am, I am, I am, I am, I am, aham, 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 asmi, 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 I am, I am, I am, I am. It doesn't shut up. What about in sleep? Well, you think it has shut up. Because when you wake up, what do you say? I slept well. That means the I was there. It just did not have the ability to broadcast, that's all. But the I doesn't go in sleep. Because if the I went in sleep, then if I say who slept, nobody will know who slept. Because I don't know, I wasn't there. Maybe the neighbor slept and I woke up. That's what you will say, but you don't say. Who slept? You say I slept. Who dreamed? I dreamed. Who is awake? Hopefully it's me. And then this is what you say. I. And who is this I? Neither the waker. Oh, that's hard. Yes, that's the whole point. Neither the dreamer nor the sleeper. Well, one thing good about it is that if I am not the sleeper, I need not feel guilty in Vedanta class when I doze off. Because you can say, that's not I. Not me. Not me. You see? One good thing. But really the I is that inhabits at the level of the individual body, mind, sense complex all the states, starting with the feeling I am in a state. And that also it enlivens, that also it proclaims, that also it shows that I am in a state. You can never say I am in a state if you are not witnessing the state. The problem is you have let go of the witness and joined the witless. This is what happens. So when you say I am in a state, what you are really telling me is that I can observe the fact that I feel like I am in a state. But you are not really in a state. You are observing that. I am angry. You are not angry. You are the witness of your anger. I am hungry. You are not all hunger. You are witnessing the fact that there is some sensations of mice running around, the stomach. So this is what it is. And you're observing a sensation, a sukshma pranic sensation, a subtle pranic level sensation. You're observing when you say I am hungry, and you're observing another sensation, a mental sensation, an emotional sensation when you say I am sad, I am angry. But I am sad all the time. Well, you're observing all the time. That's all it means. When you use all the time, that means you're observing it all the time. Today what? Depressed. Tomorrow what? Depressed. Tomorrow what? Depressed. Day after tomorrow depressed. Pressed, suppressed, repressed. Depressed, depressed, depressed. That means what? When you say, I have been depressed for the past 20 years, what are you saying? I have been observing that depression for the past 20 years. This is amazing. So really speaking, everything is an object of observation except the I. Oh, this is not fair. Why should the I not be something which is subject to observation? Very sad. What to do now? We have good news here also. Because the I, since it is self-proclaiming, self-revealing, it is also, therefore it is self-relieving, because in the sense that you don't have to wait for it to be revealed. Oh, ye self, when am I going to catch you? When are you going to give me darshan? When are you going to be revealed? You don't have to do that. You can say, oh, ye self, the revealer of everything, and the revealer of everything cannot but reveal itself. It reveals itself. It reveals everything else. What's your problem? Why can't you see this? No, but I want to see the self-special darshan I want. Go to Tirupati, okay? Yeah. There they have two lines. One is I think they have abolished that now because the common people complained. But in certain temples, like these rich temples, there is one Balaji temple in Tirupati. And then there is the regular darshan line. 17 hours, and to see God for half a second, and then there you go and see, you're hardly seen the head, you've not yet to see the toes, and they say Jargandi, 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 keep moving, because there's other people waiting for 17 hours behind you. Keep moving, and you just have this sense of, oh, this is not fun. And then so you pay some extra money to go into a VIP darshan line. Only 6 hours waiting. And 10 hours are knocked off. Okay, fine. Then you make your way. There also don't think that you will be able to see for as long as you want. Jargandi, Jargandi, keep moving, keep the line moving. They don't let you stand there. You see? So this is like this small darshan I keep wanting. No. This big darshan which is you. Don't settle for small darshan. That Balaji, that Tirupati, that Bhagavan is you. That is you. And that magnificence of that is that it reveals everything. And it reveals itself without needing some other revelation to come and to say that you exist. You don't need an existence certificate. Nobody can give you one also. Marriage certificate they will give. As many times as you want, as many times as you get married, they will give marriage certificate, no problem. But existence certificate, no. They will not give, they cannot give, because of the fact that there is no need to give an existence certificate. This is what we mean by self-existent. And that which is self-existent is self-evident, it is evident to itself, and it becomes the locus to which everything becomes evident. And it also becomes the locus of the entire Jagat, of the entire manifest world. Like even one sustains the dream world, in the dream, the self sustains the entire Jagat. out of which everything arises, by which everything is sustained, and to which everything is resolves. This is the truth of this self, which I thought was in misery, pickled in misery of samsara. And this is the one I didn't even need to be plucked out from the liquid. It is just the knowledge alone allows the liquid to just drain itself and see that it is one with the whole. So yattat adrishyam, not an object of sight, because the seer is it. Seen is not outside of it. Seer-seen dichotomy is also arises within it, like the two waves, big wave and small wave, arise from the same ocean. One is called seer wave, another is called seen wave. And seen wave is feeling upset because I am not the seer. Seer wave is feeling upset, I am not all that is seen. And in fact the ocean is chuckling all along because the ocean is the one who is the seer and the seen, out of whom the consciousness of the seer consciousness rises, seen consciousness rises, and when there is nothing to rise, it is still consciousness. Awareness, that unending oceanic awareness which sustains the world of breakers, tsunamis and small little lapping waves. This is what this awareness is, this is what the self is. And the Dhira who is able to see this, who both has the ability to see this and know this, and who is the knower of this, both have to be taken. The one in process of knowing and the one who knows, both these, knows that the self is adrishyam, does not look for Bhagavan, in specific places at specific times. How do you look for Bhagavan in a specific time? Some people feel like Brahman only abides from 3:30 to 6:30 in the morning. It is called Brahmam Muhurtam Brahma Vela. And the rest of the time Brahman takes a holiday. No. Brahman is not time specific. But then why is it called Brahma Vela? So that everybody else is asleep and it's a good time to inquire into Brahman. It's a good time for classes, 4 o'clock in the morning. Right? People are cringing. So that is why it is called Brahma Vela. Not because Brahman only abides in this particular time. If Brahman is only in a particular time, then Brahman becomes finite, limited. We are talking of that which is para, absolute, limitless. And then what? If it's adreshyam, then what is the next thing that it is not? It is being negated. All the ways of wrongly knowing Brahman are being fastly and furiously being negated. Then if I can't see it, many things I cannot see, but I can touch, like what? Air. See, if I go like this, I can't see air, but I can grasp it, I can touch it. It is cool against my skin. So maybe Brahman is like that, has an airy, fairy quality. And it is all around, it is limitless. Yes, air is limitless, everywhere it is there. And then it is there, I can grasp it. No, agrahyam. So adreshyam means what? Cannot be seen by the sense organs. And then agrahyam negates the karmendriyas. As karmendriyas means the organs of action. Cannot grasp it, cannot do anything with it, cannot mold it into something, cannot beat the consciousness out of it, and cannot do anything with it. This is what Brahman is that it is not subject to being objectified by the hands, legs and the organs of action or even speech. Cannot be. Then why are you talking? Because I am not talking about Brahman. I am talking in a way that indicates that Brahman is you. That's why I can talk. Yes. I am not describing Brahman. I am describing all that Brahman is not. And therefore that which is Brahman you understand as yourself. And even when I am describing Brahman, and if I am using the words such as existent, self-conscious, if I am using that in the form of all knowledge, limitless, it is at once you are understanding it as you. It's not outside of you. Those are just indicatory words that go and commit suicide in their mission of communicating what is, because the words die away And that knowledge which the words have not created the knowledge. The words have indicated to that which is you. And since that you is self-revealing, self-existent, self-broadcasting, and the light of all lights, you understand it as you. So therefore I can talk, because I am not describing and saying this is Brahman. Because if I say this is Brahman, that means that is not Brahman, and then that other thing is not Brahman, now is Brahman, then is not Brahman, then is Brahman, now is not Brahman. So then I will fall into my own pickle of saying that Brahman is beyond time, space, everything. The reason I can justify continuing to talk, which is a good thing because that's the only thing I know how to do. The reason I can justify being able to continue to talk to you is because I am not trying to list the qualifications of Brahman. Yeah, I only listed the qualifications of Dhira, the one who can see Brahman. That's different. I can list the qualification of the personality. I cannot and need not list the qualifications of the person because it is at once you. Yeah, that's a different thing. Very different. And this has to be understood. So it's not an object of sight, hearing, etc. You cannot hear Brahman. I want Brahman to make a special sound. So I'm going deep in meditation. Of course, without eating for 3 days. And then the sound comes. Kuru, 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 kuru. What is that? Yeah, hunger. The gastric juices advertising that food has not been taken in. This is what it is. Don't be taken in by that sound. That's not the sound of Brahman. And so it cannot be grasped by the ears. Yes. And some people say that Brahman makes anahat sound, a soundless sound. What is a soundless sound? It's the sound of silence. This is good for composing songs. It is not good for, some kind, this kind of an inquiry. That's why I already said Dhira. Yes, I have barricaded myself with, I cannot be assailed by any kind of thing because I have already explained what Dhira is. So this kind of nonsensical, the experienceless experience. What is this? People say this. What is this experienceless? No, you have to know. If you know, you don't talk. If you talk, you don't know. Just shut up. You tell that person. Shut up right now. Let me talk. Because I don't subscribe to your belief that if you talk, you don't know. And if you know, you don't talk. I don't subscribe to that. It's just a belief left over from, some kind of spiritual romanticism. Keep it back in the fridge where it belongs, where the leftovers belong. Don't bring it here. Don't air out your leftovers. This is ridiculous. We have to see the holes in this theory that there is a special sound which is Brahman. There is this special sight which is Brahman. Brahman comes in special darshan in the form of Bhagavan, in the form of my Ishta Devata Bhagavan as I want him to be, her to be. This is ridiculous. Very ridiculous. No, but then how Krishna had come for Arjuna, and special experience he had. Yes, he had. What happened? 6 more chapters of the Bhagavad Gita happened. What does it show? That he didn't learn anything from this special experience other than quake with fear. Yes, he started to quake with fear. That's what happened. He just started to tremble. And in the first chapter, before he knew anything, what was he doing? Trembling. And then the 11th chapter, he trembled some more. That's all. Same trembling, Jivik tremors continued. What changed? Nothing changed. No, but I want Bhagavan to come. This is the same spiritual romanticism of the second coming of Christ. What makes you think, let us just take it the other way, what makes you think Bhagavan is not here right now? Prove that to me, that Bhagavan is not here right now. Then I will entertain your spiritual romanticism that Bhagavan will come someday in a particular form and I have to keep watching for that form. Prove that Bhagavan is not here right now. You cannot. You cannot prove that. Why? Because all that is here We are talking is that which I can sense, which I can see, everything I can sense, everything I can see, and everything that I am, that I can objectify as belonging to this I is included in this limitless universe. And this limitless universe includes the seer. So therefore, the maker of the universe cannot be seen, because the maker of the universe is non-separate from this universe. This is what we say in Hindi, Kan Kan Mein Bhagavan. Every molecule, Kan means molecule, every atom is Bhagavan. Every atom is Bhagavan. So never say I cannot see Bhagavan, because wherever the eyes fall, there is Bhagavan. And then Adreshyam here doesn't mean that wherever you see is Bhagavan. That's not what it's negating. What is it negating is a special Bhagavan in a special form, objectifiable by a pair of eyes, either a pair of eyes that are special or a pair of eyes needing a specialist. So, a special pair of eyes objectifying Bhagavan is being negated here. The negation is very thorough. And the negation is needed to know this Para, this Brahman, this Bhagavan, because without the negation, nothing is understood, because I am hooked, addicted to the sense organs, objectifying everything. I am hooked to the status of the knower, which is very difficult for me to dismantle, this mantle of knowership. I know everything by being in charge of it. Yes, I know that. I know that, I have discovered this, I have named this. That's why every colonizer, whenever they went, they named it after themselves. They named continents after themselves, they named the expedition after themselves, they named roads after themselves, they named various species, like the scientists discover the species, they name the species after themselves. Because there is a power in knowing and there is a power in naming, and without being a knower you cannot name. This is very interesting, very exciting for our purposes, because here, that power in knowing and that power in naming is deemed as a sad little power that you are holding on to, bereft of seeing your own glory. You are exchanging that power, which is all power, all knowledge, for this little power over one microscopic, worm, or not even a worm, a microscopic being that you cannot even see with your eyes, that you need another scope to scope it out, and then you say, oh, thank God this is named after myself, and that star somewhere which is a dwarf is named after me, and people will have a certificate also given by the government. This, because you are a star, we have named this star after you. Who gave the government the right to name that star? No, because we discovered it. So we can dispense the names and give a naming ceremony. This is ridiculous. So for that little small twinkling dwarf which is going to go out, which maybe in a few years, blue dwarf, and then that is what you are named after. Better to name yourself after one Smurf, which is also a blue dwarf. Smurf? Yeah. That's also a blue dwarf. Why go all the way somewhere there, 12 billion years, light years? Why go there? Yeah. Name yourself Grumpy after one Smurf. Enough. This is telling life as it is. Crazy. This is so crazy. And this whole naming ceremony, this power and empowerment is actually, you are subscribing to your own disempowerment. It's like that fellow, who was the king of Raipur. Raipur is a small village in middle India. Actually we can have a pun on it. Rai means mustard seed. So Raipur may be perhaps the size of the mustard seed, this kingdom. You need to look at it with a magnifying glass, because this part was taken away by the Britishers, this part was taken away by everything, and this small fellow, this hypothetical king of Raipur, this is a made up story. Okay, so this hypothetical king of Raipur, is told we hereby crown you the king of the entire universe of names and forms. The whole planet, yes, whole solar system, yes, all the galaxies, yes, everything, this expanding universe, we crown you the Lord of the universe. Do you accept? And he goes into a little, ruminating despondency. What? Come on, say yes. Accept it, take it. This is, you are being handed the title of the lordship, overlordship of the entire universe. I have one question. What is that? Is Raipur included? Will I still be king of Raipur? That is his concern. This is how ridiculous it is when you want to name and sit in the place of no worship of a specific group of things that you know, and you are unwilling to let go of the no worship. When you see that you are included, there is no knower, no difference, you have that whole universe. You have nothing to lose but your own ignorance. And that you have the whole universe to understand as the truth of you. You have Bhagavan, you are Bhagavan. And this is the resistance to not knowing oneself as Bhagavan, because I am afraid. There are two kinds of fears. I am afraid that all the small things that I know will be taken away from me. But look at what all you are getting. That is not taken away. That you are the knower is dismantled. Because you cannot be the knower and the known at the same time. There is a contradiction. If you are the known, then you become finite. If you are the knower, you are already finite in relation to that which is known. You are separate from that. This is the knowledge of non-separation. Therefore, it relies heavily on negation. Na iti, not this, not this. Then that this, what it is, will be revealed later. So, yattad adrishyam, agrahyam. Don't bring out the pause or the clause to think how to know, how to feel out Brahman. No. That which cannot be felt is Brahman. That every feeling is Brahman. Feeler, field, difference is not there. That is Brahman. And then what? Agrahyam. And then agotram. Because the next thing is, where did it come from? This thing that cannot be seen, cannot be heard, cannot be, agrahyam, and then cannot be felt. So, what is its last name? First name I understood, Brahman. What is the last name? This is Gotra, means last name. Yeah. Don't look for a lineage. Oh, but just yesterday you said lineage is important. Teaching lineage, not Brahman lineage. That which doesn't have a lineage is Brahman. Lineage means what? The first word of lineage is line plus age. Yes. So you have an aging line, from starting from the beginning of this line to the end of this line. So that which has a beginning and that which has a, by inference, that which has an end is called lineage. So where did Brahman come from? It did not come. That's why it cannot come again. Yeah. So it never came. Oh, but then how are we studying that which never came? Because it never went. That's why. It always was, always is, always shall be. But how do I know it? Because it is you. That which is always you and never an object of a beginning or an ending. The one whose lineage cannot be traced. Oh, meaning too old historically, because many things we don't know the lineages of. No. That which is bereft of a line, bereft of aging, bereft of lineaging, bereft of beginning, bereft of end, does not have predecessors, because if this is the cause, then the cause has one Dada cause, then that is a problem. That doesn't have a cause, that doesn't have a cause, that which is the causeless cause. That's why it doesn't have a lineage. Oh, so it started a lineage, neither did it start a lineage. Agotram means neither does it belong to a lineage. It's not in the middle of a lineage, it's not at the end of a lineage, it's not also at the beginning of a lineage. There is no lineage, no last name. Only Brahman, no last name at all. Agotram. And then what? Avarnam. Maybe some color. Maybe it is just rosy. Brahman is very rosy. No. Brahman is not rosy. Oh, then it's drab and brown and dull. No. Brahman is not drab, not dull, not pink, not in the pink of health. Because the color, again, if you look at the colors of the prism, then if you are one color, you cannot be another color. Again, that limitation comes. So Brahman has no color. Color includes size. Brahman has no size. Why? All colors are Brahman. All sizes are Brahman. Small, medium, extra small, extra large. Everything is Brahman. Brahman is no particular size, free of size. All sizes are not free of Brahman. All sizes depend on Brahman. Brahman is sizeless. All colors depend on Brahman. Brahman is colorless. Varna also means class. All classes depend on Brahman. Brahman is classless. Yes. Formless, nameless. Oh, but then if it's formless, nameless, how do I know? Because it is you. And you are self-broadcasting, self-revealing. And then what? Achakshushrodram. Achakshushrodram means without eyes or ears. So adreshyam means that which cannot be grasped by the eyes or the ears. Here maybe Brahman has eyes and ears. No. Brahman is looking. Be careful. Brahman is watching. We had that story of the children's trip to the convent. They went to a convent. And the convent had one entrance to the chapel. And they had to bow at the chapel and then come out of the chapel. And then at the entrance they had kept a plate of cookies. And at the exit they had kept a plate of apples. And on the plate of, it was the other way around. Entrance there was apples, exit there was cookies. On the apples there was a sign which the nuns had put. Take only one. God is watching. So everybody, all the children had to go. The first graders going to the convent with the fingers on their lips in their starched uniforms. They had to go in single file and all hush, hush, quiet, quiet, not talking. Take one apple because God is watching. And somebody had scribbled over the cookies at the exit. Take as many as you want. God is watching the apples. Yeah. Take as many as you like. And therefore, how was this discovered? Because the Mother Superior was aghast that such quiet children, somewhere near the exit, they were screaming at each other and pulling each other's hair because of this sign. God is busy watching the apples. Take the cookies. So this is what happens if Brahman has a pair of eyes. He can only watch some jivas, whereas certain other baddies get away with everything. Here he is watching one person, who told a few white lies and who's a habitual liar like Pinocchio, the nose is growing long. And then there the group of people right under Brahman's nose is getting away with grand larceny and, hedging from the hedge funds. And this is the people. Yeah, this is what happens if Brahman has eyes and ears. Please understand. Yeah, so the one that doesn't have eyes, doesn't have ears. Oh, the only other thing that I know that doesn't have eyes or ears is a rock. Rock doesn't have eyes, doesn't have ears, nothing it sees. Therefore, this non-dhira, pretending to be dhira, masquerading as dhira, therefore logic concluded, Brahman is what? Inert. achakshuhu but pashyati, ashrotram shrunoti, apanipadam manojabam. You know, this is all from other Upanishads. Shvetashvatara Upanishad says achakshuhu. It means it doesn't have eyes, but it sees everything. Doesn't have mind, but knows everything. Doesn't have hands and legs, but is all pervasive. Without hands and legs, without an airplane and helicopter, is able to hover over everything. Hoverer is Brahman. That which is hovered over is also Brahman. That is the idea. That is what non-separateness means. Because if you have this pair of eyes that are watching, watching, be careful, this is not some kind of a thing. Otherwise you are always in perpetual fear. It is not a fear-driven knowledge. It's not a fear-based knowledge. It's based on this all-pervasive consciousness, this awareness, which does not need eyes to see. Because it is all knowledge, it sees without needing to have a pair of eyes. That's why we have that chant. Sahasrashirsha Purushaha. This Purusha, this cosmic being, this Bhagavan. Every head is the head of Bhagavan. Sahasrakshaha Sahasrapat. All eyes, 1,000 eyes. Why only 1,000? Because you have to stop counting somewhere. 1,000 hands, 1,000 legs. Meaning is the all-seeing eye. Pun intended. E-Y-E and I, both. Is the all-seeing eye, all-hearing ear, all-hearing eye, all-seeing, all-moving, all-pervasive eye alone. And so therefore it doesn't need a special pair of eyes to see anything, because that knowledge sees everything and it doesn't see itself because it is the seer. It doesn't need to see itself because it knows it is, and that's why it knows it is aware of itself. Everything becomes aware, everything becomes evident, to which this is what we are talking about. And so achakshushrothram, it doesn't have jnanendriyas, and then it doesn't have karmendriyas either. Tat, that same thing, just so that the Upanishad knows that we are not talking of something else. That yat tat is repeated. That same tat is apanipadam, without hands and legs. Brahman, if it had a pair of hands and legs, especially a pair of legs, seeing the state of the universe, it would flee, and I would not fault it. I would not fault Bhagavan for running away from this Jagat as fast as the poor legs would carry them, really, because look at the state of the affairs. But thankfully it doesn't have hands and legs, so it is here to stay. That means it's not going anywhere. Now a doubt, a very special doubt can arise. What is that? Cannot see, cannot hear, okay? Does not have hands and legs. And before that, is not graspable with my hands and legs. And is not even available for perception. How do you know it is there? Maybe we are becoming best friends with our Buddhist neighbors. Maybe we are shaking hands with the Buddhists and saying, you shunya, I shunya, we all shunya, 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 shunya. What is shunya? Zero. The truth of me is zero. Who thinks? The hero thinks, I am zero. At least before I was a king of Raipur, I had a small little kingdom, the size of a mustard seed, full of knowledge of what I knew. And now that is also gone, and now you're saying where to put the crown, because there is zero, non-existent. Imagine zero wearing a crown, it will fall through because there is nothing to hold it up. At least before I had a small Raipur, so you should have left me in my bathing in my, in the waters of my ignorance. I was okay. taking a bath in the waters of my ignorance and saying, long live Raipur, long live my little kingdom of notions, long live the ocean of samsara, in which my notions are also included, long live me, the flotsam and jetsam in samsara. Now you are saying I am not even a flotsam, I am non-existent. Is this acceptable? Is this acceptable? It's not acceptable. Then how come it is acceptable to Buddhists? Actually, it is getting increasingly non-acceptable to them also. I have a very interesting story to share. One Hindu man went to a Buddhist retreat. Raipur one is made up, this one is real. Okay, so one Hindu man went to a Buddhist retreat because he didn't know where else to go. He wanted some quiet time and he chose one silent retreat. He shared this with me. And then there was a Buddhist priest, a Buddhist monk from Africa. Actually, we know him also. He's a wonderful person. So, and that Buddhist monk did the interview to take him in, to say, okay, who are you and where have you come from? Just like an intake of how long you plan to stay, etc. And when the man said he is Hindu, the Buddhist monk said, Hari Om and all that kind of thing. But we are very different from what you are. We are not going to, in our Dharma talks, be talking about Bhagavan and be talking about, Brahman and all those things that you want to know. The Buddhist monk was honest, we know him, he's a wonderful person, very jovial, African monk. And he said, we are not going to be talking about that. And this man said, okay, but what is it that you talk about? We talk about shunyata. What is shunyata? What is this zero-ness, non-existence? Well, that means everything is empty of name and form. Well, that's what we also say. That's what we also say. That you are is empty of all names and all forms, including the status of the knower. That's what we are also saying. So if that's what indeed shunyata is, we don't have a problem with shunyata. But that is not how it is described, unfortunately. So if again, first we had the Vedantic study of the Christian scriptures in the first portion of the class, and now we are concluding with the Vedantic study of the Buddhist scriptures, then there is no problem. If that's how it is interpreted, we have no problem. But why are you so committed to your own way of looking at the scriptures? Because their way makes no sense. But how can you be so sitting on your high hobby horse and of subjectivity and say that their way is nonsensical and your way alone is right? Well, their way gives me a fright. So therefore I have to be right. Because really speaking, it is not in keeping with the quest. Who wants to be zero? Tell me. If you are zero, zero is not a nice thing, non-existent. Can you say I am non-existent with a straight face? Try. I don't exist. You have to smile. Because who is saying the existent one? You cannot deny your existence. And if you say I don't exist, it's like a child saying I'm not hiding behind the door. Advertising where it is hiding. So similarly, if you say I don't exist, that means you're advertising your existence. It is against, not here, it's not even, you don't have to logically come to your existence. I pinch, therefore I am. I pinched, therefore I am. Pincher, pinched, same, So, you don't have to say that. Even without giving yourself a pinch and hearing the ow come out of the mouth to the ear, you don't have to conclude, therefore I exist because I heard the ow. Ouch. This is the sound of Brahman. Because there I ouch, therefore I am. You don't have to say that. I am, therefore I can say ouch. That I am is the basis for everything, and that I am is self-proclaiming, self-declaratory, and it doesn't have to be, named by some other power or some other entity or some other consciousness. There doesn't exist anything else that can name it. There need not be named by anything else, and it is an existence that cannot be denied. Therefore, next word, nityam. Don't think it is asat, non-existent. Like even the horns of a rabbit. You know rabbit? Yes. You know horns? Yes. Do you know horns of a rabbit? No. Absolute non-existent. Atyanta abhava. Why? Because it cannot exist. How can horn of rabbit exist? You know, very difficult situation. And such are the ways that people, lived happily ever after in certain childhood stories. The princess had a strange ailment. Princess of Raipur, of course, and had a strange ailment which nobody could diagnose. All the Vaidyas, all the doctors came and gave up. And she was all the time withdrawn and very worn, And later it was understood it as a vitamin D deficiency because she was very protected and she was not allowed to go outside. That's why she was pale. And so, anyway, so she was pale. She was overprotected by this king of Raipur who was very afraid of, of leaving her some freedom. And then the princess was a mess. And she had strange ailments, strange fevers that nobody could diagnose. Then the king, advised by the minister, sent a dindima. What is a dindima? Yeah, a drum proclamation. The town crier went with the drum and said, whosoever can cure the princess can marry her, will be given hand in marriage. There was already a young man who was in love with her, who really liked her. And he shifted into the palace, baggage, and started to live there and said, I can cure this princess, but I'll need a year's time. Yeah, take your time, king said. She's been like this for 18 years, so 20 years of her life, so who cares, one more year, nothing will happen. Take your time. And then he said, I need some special ingredients which can be only gotten from higher Himalayas. And he names a few herbs. And then he said, just the first 2 inches of the horns of this rare rabbit, no pun intended in rare, and then this rabbit, and you please bring that. And like a fool, the king dispatched all the servants everywhere. And he also said, if you don't find it and come back, I'll cut off your heads. Which was another foolish thing to say, because of course they didn't find it and they lived happily ever after in other kingdoms. They never came back. Yeah, and so he went on living and being the guest of the palace. From when he became a guest to pest, no one knew. But then he continued to enjoy the luxuries, the wine and the grapes and everything, the song, and of course, woman, singular, the princess. He just moved out with her, taught her singing, dancing, and immediately she was suffering from depression, and he took her out, gave her an airing in the palace grounds, and she was just back to her rosy cheek self. And then, and who cares whether the horns of the rabbit came or not. Then the princess said, if I'm going to marry, I'm only going to marry this person. And they lived happily ever after, thanks to the horns of the rabbit. Non-existent. Correct? Yeah. So the non-existence, you cannot say that Brahman doesn't exist. Why? You cannot say that with a straight face, because you exist. Nityam means that which always was, is and will be without undergoing any change. So Nityam is negates the fact that it has a beginning. Yeah. Nityam means that which never has a beginning. Like Agotram. And here we have the negative. We understand Brahman to various negation, through various negations. And now we are understanding Brahman through the positive statements of what actually it is. So Nityam, what you are. And then what? Vibhum. Vibhuhu means that which is Vividham bhavati iti vibhuhu. That which becomes many. If it becomes many, then Brahman must be so thin, less than a sliver. Because first it was full, like the moon, then it became the oceans, then it dropped a notch, then it became the five elements, then it dropped another little, kala. Kala means another little sliver, gone. And then it becomes the air and the trees and everything. Then five elements includes that. Then it becomes the trees and all the living things, all the beings. Then it dropped. Then it became something else. It dropped, and now what does it have left for itself? Very little sliver of Brahman sitting on a velvet cushion in Vaikuntha, in a place called the Indian heaven. No. Purnam adaha, that which is whole, the cause is whole, and Purnam, what? What comes after Purnam adaha? Idam. This, the effect is also Purna. Purna means whole. The cause is whole. The cause inheres the effect. So the DNA of the cause transfers to the effect. The effect is also whole. The effect is non-separate from the cause. So the cause doesn't become the effect by undergoing a change. That is why Nityam, the cause, becomes quote unquote the effect without undergoing any change. Vibhum, vividham bhavati. And then one small, trivia, Vedanta trivia with a little, two little technical terms. There are two ways of undergoing change. One is called parinami change. A change where the cause becomes the effect, like even milk becoming yogurt. After that you cannot say, I want to make some coffee, where is my milk? Yes, you cannot have milk back. You can have yogurt in your coffee, a very unsavory prospect, so we will not go with that. Right? So the cause that becomes the effect is called parinami karanam. Karanam, all right, cause, but it is parinami, it has become the effect. Then there is another explanation of a cause that quote unquote sustains the effect without becoming the effect. Like even the ornaments. Million ornaments, how many golds? One gold. Does the gold undergo a change to become the ornament? No. Only the change is just name and form. You call it bangle, you call it chain. Actually you should call it change. But really you call it chain. It's an as though change. It's not a real change. Why? Because when you take that ornament, you walk over to any goldsmith shop, especially in India, they don't see the intricate making charges, they don't reimburse you for that, they don't see the lovely gems that you have, they unceremoniously pluck it out with a pair of those tweezer tongs, those tongs for the gems, they pluck it out. They see only gold, they are enlightened to that. All that is here is gold. All that is here in the universe of the names and forms, ornaments, is only gold. So the gold, they are enlightened to that particular thing, not their own nature. So it's a selective enlightenment that is meant to lighten your pockets, because they minus a lot of things before they give the money. So all that is here is gold. The jeweler knows. The ornament resolves into gold, arises out of gold, and is sustained by gold throughout the process, throughout its life. And therefore all that is here is gold, 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 gold. Gold alone is. And this is the kind of ornament which hasn't undergone, the gold which hasn't undergone change to become the ornament, is called Vivarta Karanam. Karanam again, cause. Vivarta, Vividham Vartate. So is many things without losing itself. So one is called Parinami, becomes the change. Vivartam does not become the change. It sustains and upholds the change without itself undergoing any change. And that is what is called Vibhum. Which is Brahman, the first one or the second one? Now I forgot. Which is the first one? Which is the second one? The gold is the second one, right? Yeah. That is the example we take for Brahman. While being that shiny self, it morphs into everything without really becoming anything. More we will see next weekend. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamadachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya
Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.
Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. Yeah, if there are any questions, I will answer. Any questions here? No? Yes.
When you were talking about the king of Raipur and,
Yeah.
and saying there's a fear that small things will be taken away and,
Yeah.
and that leads to resistance, you also said there was another thing that led to resistance, but
No, first is that loss of the smallness. Second is loss of the status of the knower. That loss of the smallness, it's not two things, it's the same thing. In the example, it's the loss of the small kingdom. In the what is exemplified is that status of the knower. The knower has a kingdom of all that is known. That it was what was exemplified. It's not two
I
things,
see.
it's the same thing. Yeah. Okay.